My name's Phil Jump, Regional Minister for the North Western Baptist Association, and it's my pleasure to give you this brief overview of our annual report for the year that's just passed, 2020. An annual report has two basic purposes. One is to show you that the finances and the accounts of the association have been properly managed, and hopefully you can see that by looking at the formal accounts that are available online. But it's also important that we give an account of how we have invested and used those finances, and this is what this part of our annual report is all about. And perhaps the place to start is by remembering why NWBA exists. And when it was formed in 2002, it was very clear that we exist to support local churches in ministry and mission. The association is not something separate from its churches, but it is those churches working together in covenant with one another. And in recent years, we've tended to organise and to present our work around what we see as the five main ways in which we engage and interact as local churches. And the first of those is by continuing to support and to equip those who are called to positions of ministry, whether that's through Baptist accreditation or through the appointment in one of our local churches. And we recognise too that in today's world, ministry comes in many different shapes and sizes, and so an important part of our role is helping one another to identify and to develop those different ministry opportunities and the people who are appointed to them. But we recognise too that leadership is a role that is often shared by many within our local churches, and there are various different roles and responsibilities that people take, and we've increasingly been recognising the importance of helping people in those varied roles in local congregations, and the Latchford Centre has certainly been an important expression of that. But we recognise that for many churches, it's not so much that they engage with NWBA as an organisation, but simply work together in local groups, work together in areas of common interest. But again, there's part of our role as an association is to help people to build those what we call purposeful relationships so that they can work together as churches and as individuals, or as pioneers, or as church planters, or in many, many other ways. But we realise too that some of the resources that we need as local churches can sometimes be better provided by working at a regional level, or even working ecumenically, or engaging with our union nationally. And so again, we see an important part of NWBA's role as working with churches to identify and provide those resources that they need. But we recognise too that in many cases we're having to do things differently because of changing circumstances, because of changing ways of being church. And so another aspect of our work is simply to look at how we can play our part in supporting churches in what we call meaningful change. And although we have faced some very different and very unexpected circumstances in recent days, we nonetheless recognise that these basic 5 core principles remain at the heart of who we are as a regional association. Now, I doubt if there is a charity in the UK or even in the world that won't be using words like unprecedented in the opening remarks of its annual report for 2020, because it really was a year like no other. And so it probably won't surprise you to discover that although we set ourselves 18 key objectives at the beginning of the year, by the end only 8 of those were fully met. 6 of them we've described as partially met, and what we mean by that is that we have fulfilled them as much as our churches were able to receive and participate in them in the light of the COVID situation. So we're going to carry them on, but they're just going to probably take a little bit longer. One of them we're just not going to meet now, and that was to work with the BU President for 2020-21 in his key themes and his key focus. And 3 of them we've simply carried over into our objectives for 2021, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. But alongside all of those things we didn't do, of course, we did find ourselves doing a whole load of other unforeseen things in response to the COVID-19 situation. But I think it's important to say that in many cases, this has enabled us to bring forward things that we'd been beginning to think about and explore anyway, particularly in relation to working online. So although there has been a lot of tragedy and a lot of struggle from an organisational point of view, I think we've coped reasonably well with everything that's come our way. Now, this is the point in a presentation like this one when you would expect me to outline our nice, tidy key objectives for 2021. But as you can imagine, at the moment, that's very, very difficult to do. And what the trustees have recognised instead is that probably through 2021 and into 2022, we're simply going to need to travel through what we're calling 4 basic phases. The first of those is where we are now, which is largely to just carry on supporting churches as the situation continues to develop and change, and just being there for people and with them as they work all of that through. And then we sense there's going to be a need for what we're calling recovery. And this is particularly focusing on helping churches to just find themselves again, as the theme of our ministers' conference was this year, and just to catch up with where they're at as local church communities. And then what we're calling a period of consolidation. In other words, a chance for us to get an overview of how our churches are and what they've experienced and what their needs are likely to be as we move forward. And then what we're calling a response. In other words, getting back to, I guess, how NWBA has traditionally operated and beginning to set our objectives and our future vision in the light of what we've learned. And so, yes, we are in a moment going to present you with some key objectives for 2021, but I think the overarching reality is simply to recognise the road that lies ahead and to see the phases that we intend to try and navigate our way through. And that is very much reflected in what we have identified as our NWBA theme for 2021, Rooted, just encouraging people to keep their grounding in these uncertain times. But while all of that is true, and our work will very much be defined by those 4 key phases that we see ourselves needing to journey through, we do feel able to offer some key objectives for 2021, although you might notice there's a few less than perhaps normal. And the first of those is to make some kind of formal assessment of the impact of COVID-19 on our churches and to get some feedback on how we have responded to that. Secondly, to keep our support networks going, where we've particularly invested a lot of time and effort during the lockdown periods, both in bringing groups of church ministers together regionally and also those with specialist ministries. We're also grateful for the partnership with Renew Wellbeing that was beginning to develop before lockdown and before COVID, and we sense that actually this is going to be particularly important as we go forward, when we know that people's mental health and emotional well-being is going to be a key priority in many communities. I'm glad to say that we're already beginning to introduce a structured learning programme through the Latchford Centre. This is over and above the leadership programme that we were already offering. And also we're working with our union to continue to introduce the continued ministry development programme that they have been so keen to promote. We also want to get our safeguarding training back underway, and I know that the team are already working on being able to offer quite a bit of that online, and we're also doing some survey work to find out where churches are up to in their safeguarding needs. And we also recognise that there are still many questions around CIOs, and so we want to put together a training event for that. And then also we're beginning to recognise that many of our churches need further help in some of what we might call the administrative or the professional services that are necessary in operating a local church. And so we're interested in doing some work in partnership with our colleagues at Baptist House to see if we may be able to offer some accountancy or some administrative support to those churches that might need it. And so, very briefly, that's an overview of the work that we've been trying to do, the work that we see ourselves doing, and very much remaining with that vision that has defined us for some years now, that our task together is to unlock the potential of all those who are part of our NWBA community.